The dust-laden wind carried the scent of wild sage as Delilah Kincaid watched the stranger ride into Winnemucca, Nevada, in the summer of 1875. She knew immediately he wasn't like the other drifters who passed through their small frontier town. There was something in the way he sat his horse, confident but not cocky, weathered but not worn down. At 42, Delilah had seen enough men come and go to recognize when one might be trouble, or something else entirely. "Another one passing through," muttered Mabel Johnson beside her on the general store porch. "Young buck looking to make his fortune, no doubt." Delilah squinted against the afternoon sun. "Not so young," she replied, noting the silver streaks in the man's dark beard as he dismounted in front of the saloon across the street. He moved with the easy grace of someone comfortable in his own skin, not the restless energy of youth. Mabel snorted. "Young enough, probably looking for some pretty little thing to settle down with." "Then he's come to the wrong place," Delilah said, gathering her packages. "I'd better get back to the boarding house before Mrs. Perkins sends out a search party." The boarding house where Delilah had lived for the past 8 years stood at the edge of town, a respectable establishment for single women and widows. Delilah fell somewhere in between, not exactly a widow, but certainly no longer a wife. Her husband Thomas had simply ridden out one morning and never returned. After 3 years of waiting, she'd accepted the likely truth and moved on with her life. She'd purchased the dry goods Mrs. Perkins needed and was halfway back when she heard hoofbeats behind her. "Madam," called a deep voice, "you dropped something back at the store." Delilah turned to find the stranger from the saloon, his bay gelding dancing sideways in the dirt road. He held out a small paper-wrapped package. "My sewing needles," she said, surprised. "Thank you, mister." "O'Brien, Owen O'Brien." He tipped his hat. Mrs. Kincaid, Delilah Kincaid." She took the package, careful not to let their fingers touch. Though Mrs. is more courtesy than truth these days. Something flickered in his eyes, understanding perhaps. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Kincaid." "What brings you to Winnemucca, Mr. O'Brien?" "Looking to settle. I've had enough of drifting." His gaze was direct, unabashed. "Heard there might be a ranch for sale outside town." "The old Samuelson place," she nodded. "Been empty since Harold passed last winter." "That's the one." He studied her face openly. "You know it?" "I do. It needs work, but the land is good." Delilah found herself oddly flustered under his gaze. "If you'll excuse me, I need to deliver these supplies." Owen O'Brien touched the brim of his hat again. "Hope to see you around town, Mrs. Kincaid." She nodded politely and continued on her way, conscious of his eyes on her back until she rounded the corner. At the boarding house, she delivered the packages to Mrs. Perkins and retreated to her room, oddly unsettled by the brief encounter. In the small mirror above her washstand, Delilah examined her reflection critically. The years had etched fine lines around her blue eyes and at the corners of her mouth. Her once golden hair now held strands of silver, though she kept it neatly pinned in a practical bun. She was trim and strong from years of hard work, but no longer young, not the sort of woman a man like Owen O'Brien would look at twice. Yet he had looked, and something in that look had awakened feelings she'd thought long buried. "Don't be ridiculous," she scolded her reflection. He was being polite, nothing more. The next morning, Delilah opened the small dressmaking shop where she worked. She had a wedding dress to finish for young Betsy Collins, who was marrying the blacksmith's son next month. The intricate beadwork required concentration, which helped keep her mind off a certain pair of gray eyes. The bell above the door jingled shortly after noon. "Good day," she called, not looking up from her stitching. "Mrs. Kincaid." Delilah's head snapped up at the familiar voice. Owen O'Brien stood just inside the door, hat in hand. He'd cleaned up since yesterday, shaved his beard to a neat trim, and his dark hair was combed back from a strong forehead. "Mr. O'Brien, what brings you to a dressmaker's shop?" "Information, mainly." He stepped further in, glancing around at the bolts of fabric and half-finished garments. "I'm buying the Samuelson place. Signed the papers this morning." "Congratulations," she replied, setting aside her work. "Though I'm not sure how I can help with ranching matters. I need someone who knows the town, who I can trust to tell me straight about suppliers, hired hands, that sort of thing." He leaned against the counter. Mayor Peterson says you've got a good head on your shoulders and know everyone worth knowing around here. Delilah raised an eyebrow. The mayor said that? More or less. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Might have added a few other complimentary things. I see. She fought down a ridiculous flutter in her stomach. And why would you trust a stranger's opinion? I'm a fair judge of character, Mrs. Kincaid. Besides, I'm buying you dinner in exchange for your advice. At her startled look, he added, At the hotel restaurant. Perfectly respectable? Delilah hesitated. Mr. O'Brien, I don't think... It's just dinner and conversation, Mrs. Kincaid. I need help, and you're the one everyone points to. His expression grew serious. I've been riding from town to town for too many years. I'm looking to put down roots before I'm too old to enjoy them. Something in his forthright manner disarmed her. Very well. Dinner at the hotel, 7 o'clock. I'll be there. He settled his hat back on his head. Thank you, Mrs. Kincaid. After he left, Delilah sat for a long moment, wondering what had possessed her to accept. She hadn't dined alone with a man in years. The gossips would have a field day. But there was something about Owen O'Brien that made her want to know more. At 6:30, Delilah stood in front of her mirror, smoothing the skirt of her best dress, a deep blue that brought out her eyes. She'd let her hair down from its usual severe bun, arranging it in a softer style. This is business, she reminded herself. Just helping a newcomer find his footing. She slipped out of the boarding house, ignoring Mrs. Perkins' raised eyebrows, and walked the short distance to the hotel. The evening air was cooling rapidly, typical of Nevada summers, and she pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Owen was waiting in the hotel lobby, dressed in a clean white shirt and dark vest. His eyes warmed appreciatively as she approached. Mrs. Kincaid, you look lovely. Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. The hotel restaurant was quiet on a Tuesday evening. They were shown to a small table by the window, and Owen held her chair with an easy courtesy that spoke of good breeding. Have you always lived in Winnemucca? He asked after they'd ordered. No, I came here 12 years ago with my husband. He was looking to make his fortune in silver mining. She folded her hands on the table. The silver didn't pan out, and neither did he. Disappeared 9 years ago. I'm sorry, she shrugged. Life out here is hard on some men. They get restless. And on women? We endure. She met his gaze. Or we don't. But we rarely just disappear. Owen nodded slowly. Fair point. Their food arrived simple but well-prepared beef, potatoes, and fresh bread. As they ate, Delilah told him about the town, its people, and the surrounding ranches. He listened intently, asking thoughtful questions. You mentioned the Samuelson place needs work, he said as they finished their meal. The barn roof was leaking last I heard, and the fences on the north pasture need replacing, but the water rights are solid, and the grazing land is good. I'll need help getting it into shape. He studied her over his coffee cup. Know any reliable carpenters? Jacob Wilson's your best bet. Fair prices, honest work. She hesitated. If you don't mind my asking, have you ranched before? Grew up on a cattle ranch in Texas, left to fight in the war, then drifted afterwards. Worked cattle drives, broke horses, tried my hand at mining. His mouth quirked. Even dealt faro for a spell, though I wasn't much good at it. And now you want to settle. Yes, madam, I do. His eyes held hers. A man gets tired of waking up in different places, never putting down roots. Something in his tone made her heart beat faster. There are younger men who've tried ranching here and failed, she said carefully. It's not easy country. I'm not looking for easy, just looking for mine. He leaned forward. And I'm not as young as I used to be, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Learned a few lessons along the way. How old are you, Mr. O'Brien? The question slipped out before she could stop it. 47 come October. And you? Delilah swallowed. 42 last month. He nodded, as if confirming something to himself. A good age, Mrs. Kincaid. We've both seen enough to know what matters. The waiter cleared their plates, and Owen insisted on walking her back to the boarding house, despite her protests that it wasn't necessary. My mother raised me better than to let a lady walk home alone after dark, he said firmly. They strolled through the quiet streets, their conversation turning to books they'd read, places they'd seen. Delilah found herself laughing at his description of a disastrous cattle drive across the Brazos River. At the boarding house gate, she turned to thank him for dinner. "Would you show me around the Samuelson place tomorrow?" he asked abruptly. "I could pick you up around noon, if your work allows." Delilah hesitated. 2 meetings in 2 days would definitely set tongues wagging. "I should check the property before I start hiring help," he continued, "and I'd value your opinion." "I suppose I could close the shop for the afternoon," she said finally. "Mrs. Collins isn't expecting her dress fitting until Friday." "I'll bring a picnic," he said, his face lighting up. "The hotel can pack something." "A picnic?" She couldn't help smiling at his enthusiasm. "Mr. O'Brien, are you attempting to court me?" His expression turned serious. "Would that be unwelcome?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. I'm not sure. We hardly know each other." "That's what courting's for, isn't it? Getting to know each other?" Delilah shook her head, a mixture of amusement and wariness in her eyes. "Mr. O'Brien, I'm too old for courting. Those days are long behind me." His smile was slow and sure. "Good. I'm tired of starting over with girls. I'd rather spend my time with a woman who knows her own mind." The simple statement left her momentarily speechless. "Noon tomorrow," he said, tipping his hat. "Sleep well, Mrs. Kincaid." She watched him walk away, torn between caution and a long, forgotten excitement. Owen O'Brien was nothing like she'd expected, and far more dangerous to her peace of mind than she cared to admit. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Delilah opened her shop early, determined to finish her most pressing work before noon. As she stitched, her mind kept wandering to Owen and his surprising declaration. "Starting over with girls," she murmured to herself. What had he meant exactly? Had there been someone, a young woman, who'd broken his heart? Or was he simply tired of the games of courtship? At precisely noon, the shop bell rang. Owen stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking freshly shaven and slightly nervous. "Ready for our expedition, Mrs. Kincaid?" "Just let me lock up." She gathered her shawl and a wide-brimmed bonnet. "Though I still think you do better with someone who knows more about ranching." "I know about ranching," he said, helping her with the door. "I need someone who knows Winnemucca." "That's you." Outside, a buggy waited, a picnic basket secured in the back. Owen handed her up and climbed in beside her, taking up the reins with practiced ease. "Did you rent this in town?" she asked as they set off. "Bought it this morning. Can't very well run a ranch without transportation." She eyed him with new respect. "You don't waste time, Mr. O'Brien." "Owen," he corrected. "And no, I don't. When you know what you want, why wait?" The implication hung in the air between them as they drove out of town. The Samuelson Ranch lay about 3 miles outside Winnemucca, a modest spread of about 200 acres nestled against the foothills. As they crested the final rise, the ranch came into view, a weathered 2-story house with a wide porch, a large barn, and several outbuildings. Fenced pastures stretched toward the hills, dotted with scrub and the occasional juniper. "It's rougher than I remembered," Delilah admitted as they approached. "Nothing some hard work won't fix." Owen's eyes were bright with plans and possibilities. "The bones are good." He helped her down from the buggy, his hands strong and warm at her waist. They explored the property together, Delilah pointing out what she knew about the water sources and grazing quality, Owen assessing the buildings with a practiced eye. "The house is solid," he said as they climbed the porch steps. "Needs a good cleaning and some repairs, but it's well built." Inside, dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the windows. The furniture was draped with sheets, the floors gritty with dirt blown in through the cracks. But Delilah could see what he meant. The rooms were generous. The craftsmanship, good. "Mrs. Samuelson kept a beautiful home," she said, running a finger along a carved mantelpiece. "They were happily married for 40 years. "Is that so?" Owen was watching her closely. "Did you know them well?" "Well enough. They came to church when weather permitted. She ordered dresses from me occasionally." Delilah smiled at a memory. Even in her 70s, she wanted pretty things. "A woman after my own heart," Owen said, appreciating beauty at any age. His gaze held hers until Delilah looked away, suddenly self-conscious. "The kitchen should be through here," she said, moving toward the back of the house. They found a large kitchen with a cast-iron stove, a pump at the sink, and ample cupboards. A door led to a small vegetable garden, now overgrown with weeds. Mrs. Samuelson grew the best tomatoes in the county, Delilah said. I was thinking of hiring a housekeeper, Owen remarked, leaning against the doorframe. Until I get settled, at least. Martha Wilson, the carpenter's wife, might be available. Their youngest just married, so she has more time on her hands. I'll speak with her. He straightened. Hungry? They spread their picnic on the porch, protected from the afternoon sun. The hotel had provided cold chicken, bread, cheese, and apple tarts, along with a bottle of lemonade. They ate in companionable silence for a while, watching a hawk circle lazily overhead. Why Winnemucca? Delilah asked finally. Of all the places you could settle. Owen considered the question. I passed through about 5 years ago. Something about it stuck with me, the way the mountains look at sunset. Perhaps. Or maybe how folks nodded and said good morning, even to a stranger. He cut another slice of cheese. When I heard about land for sale, it seemed like a sign. And there was nowhere else you had ties? Family? A shadow crossed his face. My parents are gone. Had a brother, but he died at Gettysburg. Never married. He glanced at her. What about you? No family pulling you elsewhere? A sister in San Francisco. We write occasionally. Delilah brushed crumbs from her skirt. My parents didn't approve when I married Thomas. He was charming but unreliable. They saw it before I did. Are they still living? No. Father passed while I was still in Winnemucca. Mother followed a year later. She sighed. By then, Thomas was gone too, and I'd made a life here. It seemed easier to stay than to start over somewhere else. Do you regret it? Staying? She considered the question carefully. No. I've built something here, respect, friendships, independence. It's not the life I imagined as a girl, but it's mine. Owen nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's worth something. Maybe everything. After they packed up the remains of their picnic, Owen showed her the barn and corrals. He spoke of his plans, the cattle he would bring in, the crops he might grow, the improvements to the buildings. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Delilah found herself offering suggestions and sharing what she knew of local conditions. As the afternoon waned, they stood by the corral fence, looking out over the land that stretched toward the mountains. I can see why you chose this place, she said softly. It has good bones, as you said. Like its new owner, Owen replied with a self-deprecating smile. A bit weathered, but still strong. Delilah laughed. You're hardly decrepit, Mr. O'Brien. Owen, he reminded her. And no, not decrepit, just experienced. He turned to face her fully. Delilah, may I call you that? I've enjoyed today more than any day in recent memory. Her cheeks warmed at the earnestness in his voice. I've enjoyed it too. Would you consider having dinner with me again, perhaps this Saturday? People will talk, she warned. Let them. His eyes crinkled at the corners. Unless you're concerned about your reputation. At my age, hardly. She smiled ruefully. Though Mrs. Perkins might have something to say about it. I'll speak with her, if you'd like. Make my intentions clear. Delilah raised an eyebrow. And what exactly are your intentions, Owen? He didn't hesitate. To court you properly, to see if what I'm feeling, what I think you might be feeling too, is worth building on. The directness of his answer took her breath away. We've known each other 3 days. Sometimes you just know. He took her hand gently. I'm not asking for promises, just time. Time to see what might grow between us. Looking into his steady gray eyes, Delilah felt the careful walls she'd built around her heart begin to tremble. I'm not young anymore, she said softly. I have my routines, my independence. I'm set in my ways. Good, he said simply. So am I. Maybe our ways will fit together. They drove back to town as the sun was setting, painting the mountains in gold and purple. Owen dropped her at the boarding house with a promise to call on Saturday at 7. Mrs. Perkins was waiting in the parlor, her face a study in barely contained curiosity. Had a nice outing, did you? She asked as Delilah hung up her bonnet. Very nice, thank you. Delilah met the older woman's gaze steadily. Mr. O'Brien wanted my opinion on the Samuelson place. Mrs. Perkins' lips twitched. And did you give it? I did. Delilah moved toward the stairs. He's coming to take me to dinner on Saturday. Is he indeed? The landlady's eyebrows rose. Moving rather quickly, isn't he? We're neither of us children, Mrs. Perkins, Delilah said with dignity. Good night. In her room, Delilah sat on the edge of her bed, her mind whirling. What was she doing, allowing Owen O'Brien to court her? After 9 years of independence, of building a life on her own terms, was she really considering letting a man, a virtual stranger, into her carefully constructed world? And yet, there was something about him. A steadiness, a certainty that drew her like a moth to flame. He didn't seem to care about her age or her past. He looked at her and saw a woman worth knowing, worth pursuing. The next few days passed in a blur of work and anticipation. Delilah finished Betsy Collins' wedding dress, started a new commission for the banker's wife, and tried not to think about Saturday evening. She saw Owen once from a distance, talking earnestly with Jacob Wilson outside the lumber mill, but he didn't approach her. By Saturday, the entire town seemed to know that Owen O'Brien was calling on Delilah Kincaid. She endured knowing looks from her customers and not-so-subtle inquiries about her gentleman friend. He's not my gentleman friend, she told Martha Wilson firmly as she pinned the woman's new skirt. He's new in town and asked for my guidance. That's all. Martha smiled knowingly. Of course, dear. Though I must say, Jacob was quite impressed with him. Says he knows what he's about when it comes to building. At 7 o'clock precisely, Owen knocked on the boarding house door. Delilah heard Mrs. Perkins greet him, her voice warmer than usual. When Delilah descended the stairs in her blue dress, Owen's face lit up in a way that made her feel 20 years younger. You look beautiful, he said simply. Tonight they dined at the small restaurant attached to the hotel. The owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, had set them a table in a quiet corner and served her special chicken mole with fresh tortillas. Over dinner, they spoke of their pasts, Owen of his years in the Confederate cavalry, Delilah of her childhood in St. Louis and her journey west. I wanted adventure, she admitted. Thomas promised me the world, and I believed him. Did you find it? Adventure? Owen asked. Some. Enough to know it's often uncomfortable and occasionally terrifying. She smiled wryly. But yes, there were moments worth the discomfort. The first time I saw the Sierra Nevada, watching a thunderstorm roll across the desert, the wildflowers after a spring rain. And now? Now I appreciate quieter pleasures. A well-made dress, a good book, conversation with a friend. Owen nodded. The older I get, the more I value peace. There's a certain contentment in knowing where you'll lay your head at night. Is that why you bought the ranch? For peace? Partly. He studied her face in the lamplight. Mostly, I suppose, for home. I've been without one for too long. After dinner, they strolled through town. The evening was warm, the stars brilliant overhead. Owen told her about his progress on the ranch, the repairs begun, the furniture uncovered and polished, his plans for cattle come spring. You sound happy, she observed. I am, happier than I've been in years. He stopped walking and turned to face her. Delilah, I'd like to kiss you. Would that be all right? Her heart skipped a beat. Here? On Main Street? He chuckled. Perhaps not, but somewhere. Mrs. Perkins would have apoplexy if I invited you in. Then we'll have to find another place. He offered his arm. Walk with me? They wandered to the edge of town, where a small park overlooked the Humboldt River. The night was quiet, the only sounds the soft flow of water and distant piano music from the saloon. In the shelter of a cottonwood tree, Owen turned to her. Here? Delilah nodded, suddenly shy. It had been so long since she'd been kissed and she'd wanted to be kissed. Owen's hands cradled her face gently, his eyes searching hers for permission. When she didn't pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers, a soft, questioning touch that asked rather than demanded. Delilah's hands found their way to his shoulders as she answered his question, returning the kiss with a tentative passion that surprised them both. When they broke apart, Owen's smile was tender. Worth waiting for, he murmured. Was it? She asked, suddenly vulnerable. Absolutely. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I'd like to do it again, if you're amenable. She laughed softly. I believe I am. Their second kiss was longer, deeper, awakening feelings Delilah had thought long dormant. When they finally drew apart, she rested her forehead against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "This is happening rather fast," she whispered. "Too fast?" His arms encircled her, warm and strong. "I don't know. It's been a long time since I've felt anything like this. For me, too." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "We can slow down if you'd prefer." Delilah considered this, then shook her head. "At our age, too slow seems as problematic as too fast." Owen's laugh rumbled through his chest. "A fair point, Mrs. Kincaid." Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged. Owen worked on his ranch during the days, often coming into town for supplies or to consult with Jacob Wilson about building projects. In the evenings, 2 or 3 times a week, he would call on Delilah. Sometimes they dined at the hotel restaurant. Other times they picnicked by the river or on the porch of his slowly transforming home. The townspeople quickly accepted them as a couple. If there was gossip, it was generally good-natured, tinged with approval rather than scandal. Owen became known as a fair employer, a generous neighbor, and a man of his word. Delilah found herself consulted more often on matters relating to the ranch, as if the town had already mentally joined their lives. One evening in late August, they sat on the newly repaired porch swing at the ranch, watching the sunset paint the mountains. The house behind them was nearly finished, floors polished, walls painted, new curtains at the windows. "I hired Billy Jenkins to help with the cattle," Owen said, his arm comfortable around her shoulders. "He'll start next week." "He's a good worker," Delilah approved. "Knows the land, too." "That's what I thought." Owen hesitated. "Delilah, there's something I want to ask you." She felt a flutter of anticipation. "Yes? We've been courting for over a month now. I hope we've come to know each other pretty well." "We have," she agreed, her heart beginning to race. "The thing is," he continued, "this house feels empty. Even with all the new furniture and paint, it's missing something important." He turned to face her fully. "It's missing you." Delilah's breath caught. "Owen, I love you, Delilah Kincaid," he said simply. "I think I started falling in love with you that first day on the general store porch, before we'd even spoken, and every day since has only confirmed what I knew then, that you're the woman I've been looking for all my life." Tears pricked at Delilah's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered, "though heaven knows I tried not to." He smiled, taking her hands in his. "Will you marry me? Make this house a home? Make my life complete?" For a moment, doubt flickered through her mind. "Are you sure? I'm not... If you say you're too old, I'll have to remind you again how tired I am of starting over with girls," he interrupted, his eyes crinkling. "You're exactly what I want, Delilah. Exactly who I want. Your age is part of what makes you perfect for me." A tear slipped down her cheek. "Then yes. Yes, I'll marry you, Owen O'Brien." His kiss was jubilant, full of promise and passion. When they broke apart, both laughing and breathless, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I got this in Carson City last week," he said, opening it to reveal a gold ring set with a single pearl. "If you'd prefer a diamond—" "It's beautiful," she interrupted, holding out her trembling left hand. "Perfect." The ring slid onto her finger, as if made for her. Owen raised her hand to his lips and kissed it reverently. "When?" he asked. "How soon can I make you Mrs. O'Brien?" Delilah laughed. "How soon can we arrange a wedding?" "Tomorrow, if you're willing," he said, only half joking. "Let's be a little more practical," she suggested. 2 weeks? That will give us time to arrange everything properly." 2 weeks, he agreed, though it will feel like an eternity. They were married on a Saturday in mid-September, in the small church at the edge of town. Delilah wore a dress of soft ivory silk that she'd made herself, with Mrs. Wilson and Betsy Collins helping with the fine details. Owen stood tall and proud in a new black suit, his face alight with happiness as she walked down the aisle to him. The entire town turned out for the ceremony and the celebration that followed. Tables were set up in the town square, laden with food contributed by every household. There was dancing and laughter, and many toasts to the couple who had found love when neither expected it. As the sun set, Owen led Delilah to the waiting buggy, decorated with ribbons and flowers by the town's children. "Ready to go home, Mrs. O'Brien?" he asked, his voice husky with emotion. "More than ready," she replied, her heart full to bursting. Their wedding night was a revelation tender, passionate, and free of the awkwardness Delilah had half feared. Owen's touch was sure, his love for her evident in every caress. In his arms, she felt young and beautiful, desired and cherished. Afterward, lying in the moonlight that streamed through their bedroom window, Delilah traced the scars on Owen's chest souvenirs of his years of war and wandering. "Any regrets?" he asked, catching her hand and kissing the palm. "Not a one," she said truthfully, "except, perhaps, that we didn't meet sooner." "Everything in its time," he murmured. Maybe we weren't ready for each other before now. The thought resonated with Delilah. Perhaps the younger versions of themselves would have passed each other by, too caught up in different dreams and expectations. Life at the ranch quickly settled into a rhythm that suited them both. Owen worked the land with the help of Billy Jenkins and 2 other hired hands, gradually building up a respectable herd of cattle. Delilah managed the household, continued her dressmaking for select clients, and started a vegetable garden that promised to rival Mrs. Samuelson's. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, talking about their day, planning for the future, or simply enjoying the peaceful beauty of their land. Sometimes Owen would play his harmonica, the sweet, melancholy tunes drifting across the darkening pastures. Other times, Delilah would read aloud from one of the books they had ordered from back east. Winter came early that year, with the first snow falling in late October. The mountains wore white caps, and the mornings dawned crisp and clear. Owen had prepared well. The barn was full of hay, the woodshed stacked high, the root cellar packed with preserves from Delilah's garden and fruit from the small orchard. On the coldest nights, they would lie before the fire in the main room, wrapped in quilts and each other. Owen would tell stories of his travels, the characters he'd met, the sights he'd seen, the lessons he'd learned. Delilah shared memories of her childhood, her dreams, the years of waiting for Thomas, and the eventual acceptance of her solitary life. "You were never meant to be alone," Owen said one night, his fingers combing gently through her hair. "Neither of us was." "No," she agreed, "though I think we needed that time apart to appreciate what we have now." As spring approached, Delilah began to suspect a change in her body. At first, she dismissed the symptoms as the natural transitions of her age, but as weeks passed and the signs persisted, she consulted with Martha Wilson, who had served as the town's midwife for 20 years. "Well," Martha said after examining her, "I'd say congratulations are in order, Mrs. O'Brien." Delilah stared at her in disbelief. "That's not possible. I'm 43. "Unusual, perhaps, but not impossible." Martha patted her hand. "My own mother had my youngest brother at 45. It happens." That evening, as they sat down to supper, Delilah watched Owen cut into his beefsteak, wondering how to share the news. "You're awfully quiet tonight," he observed, glancing up. "Everything all right?" "I saw Martha Wilson today," she began, her hands twisting in her lap. Owen's face immediately showed concern. "Are you ill?" "No, not ill." Delilah took a deep breath. "Owen, I'm going to have a baby." His fork clattered to the plate. "A baby? Are you sure?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Martha says I'm about 3 months along. The baby should come in late summer." For a moment, Owen sat perfectly still. Then he was out of his chair, kneeling beside her, his hands framing her face. "A baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "Our baby. You're not worried about my age?" "Worried? Of course I'm worried. I'll worry about you both until the day I die." He kissed her fiercely. "But happy? Delilah, I'm beyond happy. I never thought I'd be a father. Never thought I'd find a woman I wanted to build a family with." Relief and joy flooded through her. I was afraid." "Never be afraid to tell me anything," he said firmly. "We're in this together, every step." The months that followed were a blend of anticipation and preparation. Owen insisted on hiring extra help around the ranch so Delilah could rest more. He expanded the vegetable garden himself, built a cradle from pine wood, and rode into Carson City to purchase books on child care and early education. The town rallied around them, genuinely delighted by the news. Women who had given Delilah knowing looks at her wedding now offered practical advice and support. Men clapped Owen on the back and teased him about midnight feedings and diaper changes. As summer progressed and her body changed, Delilah found herself marveling at life's unexpected turns. A year ago, she'd been a solitary dressmaker, resigned to a quiet, independent existence. Now, she was a wife, a rancher's partner, soon to be a mother. "I never imagined this," she told Owen one evening as they sat on their porch, his hand resting protectively on her rounded belly. "Any of it?" "Regrets?" he asked, echoing his question from their wedding night. "None." She covered his hand with hers. "Though I still think I'm too old for this adventure." He laughed, the sound warm in the gathering dusk. "And I'm still glad of it. I wouldn't want to face parenthood with anyone younger or less wise." Their daughter was born on a hot August night, with Martha Wilson attending and Owen pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door. After hours of labor, Delilah delivered a healthy, strong, lunged girl with a thatch of dark hair and her father's gray eyes. "She's perfect," Owen whispered when Martha finally allowed him in. He sat gently on the edge of the bed, staring in awe at the tiny bundle in Delilah's arms. "Just like her mother." "I was thinking we might name her Hope," Delilah suggested, her voice tired but happy. "Because that's what she represents for us both, hope for the future we never thought we'd have." "Hope O'Brien," Owen tested the name, then nodded. "It's perfect." The next few months were a whirlwind of adjustment and joy. Nights were short as they took turns walking with the fretful infant. Days were full of the constant demands of both baby and ranch. Yet, through the exhaustion and challenges, their love for each other and for their daughter only deepened. By Hope's first birthday, the ranch was thriving. Owen had expanded their herd, added a new barn, and hired a young couple to help with the increasing workload. Delilah had resumed her dressmaking on a limited basis, working from a sunny room Owen had built onto the house specifically for that purpose. They celebrated their daughter's milestone with a small gathering of friends from town. As the summer afternoon waned, Owen found Delilah standing at the edge of the yard, watching Hope toddle determinedly after a butterfly. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. O'Brien," he said, slipping an arm around her waist. "I was just thinking how lucky we are," she replied, leaning into him. 2 years ago, I thought my life was settled comfortable but fixed. I never dreamed there could be so much more waiting. All because you were willing to take a chance on a weathered old cowboy," he teased. "Not so old," she protested, "and not nearly as weathered as you claimed." He laughed, drawing her closer. "I knew what I wanted when I saw you, Delilah. I just had to convince you I was worth the risk." "The best risk I ever took," she murmured, turning to kiss him. Hope abandoned her butterfly chase and toddled toward them, arms outstretched. Owen scooped her up, settling her between them in a family embrace. As the sun set over their land, painting the mountains in gold and casting long shadows across the fields they had tended together, Delilah felt a contentment deeper than any she'd known. This was home, not just the house and land, but the love they'd built, the family they'd created against all expectations. She had once thought herself too old for new beginnings. Now, watching her husband and daughter laugh together, she understood that life's richest chapters could come at any age, that love, when it finally arrived, was worth every year of waiting. 5 years passed, bringing changes and deepening the roots they had planted. The ranch prospered, expanding to include sheep as well as cattle. Hope grew into a spirited, curious child with her father's determination and her mother's gentle heart. And to everyone's surprise, not least Delilah's, the O'Briens welcomed a son when Hope was 3. James Thomas O'Brien arrived on a snowy December night, a quieter baby than his sister had been, but equally determined. Owen, by then 52, took to fatherhood the second time with the same devotion and wonder as the first. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Owen presented Delilah with a gift the deed to a small building in town. "For your dressmaking," he explained as she stared at the paper in confusion. "You've outgrown the room at home, and this way you can take on more apprentices, like you've been wanting." "But it's so far from the ranch." "Not so far," he interrupted. "And Billy can manage things if I need to be in town with you and the children. You've supported my dreams, Delilah. Now it's time I helped build yours." The dressmaking shop opened the following spring, with Delilah taking on 2 young women as apprentices. 3 days a week, she would drive into town with the children, teaching Hope her letters while instructing her apprentices in the finer points of tailoring. The other days were spent at the ranch, where she and Owen continued to build the life they'd begun so unexpectedly. They weren't without challenges. The winter of 1882 was particularly harsh, with blizzards that trapped them in the house for days and threatened their livestock. Owen developed a persistent cough that spring, frightening Delilah until Dr. Reynolds assured them it wasn't serious, just the aftermath of too many cold, damp days tending to stranded cattle. Through it all, their love remained the foundation that sustained them. On the days when Delilah worried about raising children at her age, Owen's steady confidence bolstered her. When he fretted about providing for their future, her practical optimism eased his concerns. In the summer of 1883, they hosted a grand party to celebrate Hope's 7th birthday and the 10th anniversary of Owen's arrival in Winnemucca. The ranch was at its finest, fields green with summer grass, gardens bursting with vegetables and flowers, the house gleaming with fresh paint and polished wood. Friends from town and neighboring ranches gathered under a canopy of cottonwood trees, sharing food and stories. Hope, dark braids flying, organized the children in games of tag and hide and seek. Little James, not quite 4, followed his sister adoringly, determined to keep up. As evening approached, Owen found Delilah in the kitchen, arranging slices of birthday cake on plates. "Need any help?" he asked, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. "Always," she said, leaning back against him. "Though, at the moment, I'm managing." "You're remarkable," he murmured against her hair. "Do you know that?" She turned in his arms, studying his beloved face, the silver now dominant in his dark hair. The lines deepened around his eyes and mouth, the steadfast love that had never wavered. "What brought this on?" "I was watching you with Hope earlier, teaching her to dance. It struck me how lucky I am, how lucky we all are that you said yes to me that day. As I recall, you were quite persuasive," she teased. "Something about being tired of starting over with girls?" He laughed, the sound as warm and comforting as it had been that first evening. "Best line I ever used, since it worked on the only woman that mattered." "It wasn't the line," she said softly, running her fingers along his cheek. "It was you, your honesty, your certainty. You knew what you wanted. Still do." He kissed her gently. "Every day with you confirms I made the right choice. Even when I'm stubborn?" "Especially then," he grinned. "Keeps life interesting." As the stars emerged in the darkening sky, the party moved to the front yard. Lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Someone produced a fiddle, and impromptu dancing began on the grass. Owen led Delilah into a waltz, as smooth and confident as he'd been the first time they had danced at a town social. Around them, other couples joined in young sweethearts, long married neighbors, even Hope attempting to teach James a simple 2-step. "Look at them," Delilah murmured, nodding toward their children. "Who would have thought we'd be here like this?" "I did," Owen said simply. "From the moment I saw you, I could picture our life together. I just had to convince you to see it too." As the music flowed around them and their friends and family celebrated under the Nevada stars, Delilah rested her head on her husband's shoulder, content in the knowledge that sometimes life's greatest gifts came when least expected, and that love, when it finally arrived, was always right on time.